Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Sharp Tech. I'm Andrew Sharp, and on the other line, Ben Thompson. Ben, how you doing?
Doing well, Andrew. Just sort of relaxing, luxuriating in the fact that basketball is over.
You're free.
Looking forward. Yeah, it's all good.
You don't have to watch this really depressing Eastern Conference battle between the Knicks and the Pacers, the Celtics and the Cavs. You're living free, and I'm doing well also. And as of this morning, I was all set to come on here and tell you that Apple had won again because I watched the damn iPad event. The event itself, very tedious, per usual with Apple, at least my experience of Apple events.
It is the fact they're sticking with, it makes a certain sense that they're sticking with these pre-recorded events because they really are just glorified sort of commercials in many respects. But yeah, they are tedious.
You know what I don't need for my commercials? I don't need them to be 35 minutes long. So tighten it up, Apple. Free tip. But that being said, you have turned me into an OLED guy. I'm an OLED snob these days, and
I think it's OLED, and you usually say OLED, but anyhow. Continue.
Okay, well, I'll work on that for the future. But the OLED,
actually, no. What you just proved is you are an OLD guy, an old guy. But anyhow, yes.
Sorry, guilty as charged. Unfortunately, you've turned me into an OLED guy, and watching the event.
OLED. Just say OLED.
Well, okay, I'm not gonna say OLED. I guess that's the full nerd category. Whatever. The point is, I want one of these damn iPads, and I have no justification for buying one. All I use my iPad Pro for is my Kindle app, and yet the technology does look really cool. So Apple will get $1,300 or whatever one of those things cost sometime over the next couple months from me.
Well, before we get to, I think, the topic du jour, the thing that occurred to me is, look, there's, why do these different levels of iPads exist, right? If you're just sort of watching TV, or at least for a lot of people, that's sort of the use case. And then it's like, well, why do different levels of TVs exist, right? You could get a big TV that costs $500 at Costco or whatever it is. Yep. Well, why are you spending $3,500 on an OLED? Well, because it looks better. And that's a legitimate reason. And it's funny because I feel like you could sell a high-end iPad that just has this incredible screen and could have the crappiest, the processor doesn't matter. Right. It's like this accidental supercomputer that actually, no, you're just buying it for the really great screen. And you know what? That's perfectly legitimate. Exactly. If that's what you use it for.
That's me. I'm completely indifferent to the M4 and everything else that Apple is trying to sell with this new generation. I don't care that it's thin. But if it's an OLED screen, tandem OLED, oh my God, I need to experience that. I can't imagine how cool my Kindle app will look on an OLED display. But that was going to be my brief follow-up to the iPad discussion earlier in the week. But then I opened Twitter this morning, and Apple released a commercial, Ben. And in the commercial, this is from The Verge, a hydraulic press slowly descends onto a whole amalgamation of artistic endeavors, and as the large metal plate drops, it crushes musical instruments and destroys classical sculptures. Tubes of paint pop like balloons, sending a cascade of color across Apple's carefully constructed canvas of stuff. Finally, it accomplishes its job. And then, as the press slowly rises, all of that artsy mess disappears. What is left behind is Apple's new, beautifully sleek iPad Pro. And so for a sample of the reaction
just wait, before we get to the reaction, what Apple was clearly going for is all of this capability is in this very small, thin device.
Yeah.
Not necessarily what was interpreted.
Well, I'm going to read two viral tweets from an ex-user named James Clark. Tweet number 1, Apple's new Crush ad is a visual and metaphorical bookend to its 1984 ad. In 1984, a monochrome, conformist, industrial world is exploded by a colorful, vibrant human. In 2024, colorful, vibrant humanity is crushed by monochrome, conformist, industrial press. And then tweet number 2, he follows up, says, I can't believe how bad this is. If I was a rival brand and wanted to create a parody ad as a protest at what Apple has become in 2024, I couldn't come up with better. Incredible. And I read those tweets only because that is the universal sentiment in the wake of this Apple advertisement. So do you agree that it's a disaster? And if so, why do you hate it?
Well, I do want to start by talking about myself. In that this ad irritated me in the presentation. Now, part of the problem was the presentation happened when I was in bed. So I was still writing actually. I forgot I was super late that day. And so I was catching up to record Dithering and get ready for it. And the very end of the pressing, there's a little emoji that rolls away and is on the edge, and he like looks terrified as he's getting pressed, and then he explodes. And I'm like, WTF? Like, I could not believe they just did that. And then I was just, I was so focused on getting Dithering out. And then when I was writing about it, I kind of wanted to make this sort of broader TV point. I wanted to revisit one of my old articles about the tragic iPad and sort of say, you know what? The iPad's fine. It is what it is. That I totally forgot to write about that moment. And then for my sake, I get on Twitter and everyone's going on about it. I'm like, I felt that too. Why did I write about that? Total missed opportunity. So I'm very irritated at myself, to be totally honest. But yeah, no, it bothered me in the moment. And it's funny because like I said, the emoji is what really got me. It's like you
don't have to murder an emoji. That's
don't
really
murder
good
the
point,
emoji.
Like, that is the tipping
emojis,
point
right?
where it becomes creepy.
I mean, but the broader point, so there's a sort of yes, I do think it is an absolute disaster, and the reason it's an absolute disaster is because of the truth embedded in it. There's that saying from, I think it's Bill Gates, we overestimate what can happen in 2 years and underestimate what can happen in 10. Mm-hmm. Well, we are, if we want to go back to 1984 and that commercial that was created for the Mac, we're not talking about 10 years, we're talking about 40 years. And when you step back, broadly speaking, and think about the impact of tech, Apple wants you to think about the positive idea, this idea that all these capabilities, what was the monetary value of everything that was crushed? Very high, right? Like, I mean, you get all this capability and all this power in one device. It's sort of the democratization of creation. It's the thing that I loved about sort of that iPad 2 introduction, where everyone can make music now. And that is almost certainly the mindset with which Apple was approaching this ad. But when you step back and you think about popular culture broadly over the last 40 years, you think about world culture broadly, and the reality is there has been a great flattening. As someone that sort of lives abroad, that has traveled all over the world, what are the reasons? I mean, I still travel more than the average person for sure. Mm-hmm. I also, to some extent, have less interest than before, in part because a lot of places are the same. And part of it is just I'm old and lazy, right? To find the truly interesting stuff, you have to really sort of work for it. If you want just a nice vacation, everywhere is kind of the same. Mm-hmm. And the implication, I don't want to say dark side, but the sort of just the reality of the democratizing of access is this sort of flattening effect that is sort of a real thing. And you see in things like aggregators, and what's the implication of an aggregator? What's the implication of getting a strategic advantage by controlling demand? It's that you completely commoditize supply. There's like the goal, all the incentives is to fit in, to be like everything else, and to sort of beat the algorithm, sort of, as it were. And that is, you end up with stuff that's all the same. You end up with the biggest stars today are people that happen to be stars 10, 15 years ago, and then can thus carry through. You want to talk like the Taylor Swift effect or something along those lines, in the fact that we probably will never have a star like that again. We'll have more stars because there's so many niches and everyone can be a star in their own category. But the universalism of sort of that moment last summer is part and parcel of Swift just being around for a long time,
right.
and being around in the total. It's interesting because this flatness is the high level is flat. Underneath, it's total sort of everything split up into niches.
Mm-hmm.
There's no universalism. So it's like the perception of one single blob and the experience of almost more isolation. This is the again, sort of the dark side of tech in many respects, and the dark side of globalization, all of which is a tech story sort of in its own right. Maybe not an IT one so much, things like containers, things like supersonic airline, or not supersonic, they're subsonic, but transcontinental airlines,
mm-hmm.
or flying over the ocean, all these sorts of things. And what this ad did in a far more powerful way than any essay could, or sort of anything else, is give you a 60-second encapsulation of the frustration and angst that everyone feels.
Yeah.
And in that regard, it was brilliant. It was a brilliant ad. It was just a brilliant ad that is not necessarily in Apple's interest.
Yeah, it's definitely not in Apple's interest.
Please give a huge Denver welcome to Mr. Dave Attell.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you. Well, I've got kind of an odd look. I've got kind of like a Andre Agassi with a drinking problem kind of look. Some problems in this country, you know what I'm talking about. Seen that tape? Some problems in this country, you know what I'm talking about. Even as we're all sitting here, somewhere out there somewhere, girls are going wild. Have you seen that tape? I like to play it backwards because then it looks like the girls have learned their lesson. Being a drunk tramp isn't for me.
I'm waiting to see whether it gets pulled off of Tim Cook's Twitter account at some point, because that's how visceral the hatred was.
The first thing I did was grab the ad, was download it.
Good.
I'm actually surprised. I thought by the time I woke up today it would be taken down,
right.
But it's still there. We'll see what happens.
I mean, I will be honest. I didn't hate it as much as everyone else. I saw the ad when I was prepping for Sharp China, and there were a few of our friends tearing into it in our tech group chat, and I was busy, so I didn't have the time to chime in and disagree. But to me, if you want to read the ad with the absolute worst faith possible, then sure, it's a powerful metaphor for a company that's crushing humanity. I am not a fan of Apple whatsoever, so I understand that reading, but purely as an ad, just aesthetically, I'm not going to say it was good, but I understand what they were going for, and I didn't have the overwhelming reaction that seemingly everyone else had.
Did you see the person who put the ad in reverse?
No, I didn't.
So they basically just played the ad as it was, but did it in reverse. So you start with this super thin iPad, and then you expand out
powerful.
into all these things. It is powerful.
Remember
it's a
what
great
life
ad.
used to be?
No,
yeah.
Again, this is no, not that. It actually delivers the idea that within this device, you get all this capability, right? It went in the opposite direction.
Oh, a simple fix for Apple. Yeah.
It's one of the most brilliant ads of all time. It really, really is. And that sort of gets to it because it captures the duality of what has happened over the last 40 years. And there are absolutely good sides and there are absolutely bad sides. And the fact you can go in either direction captures that so brilliantly. Again, like the reason that the ad is engendering such a response is because there is truth in it. It's not It's not dishonest. It's not mean. It's stating a reality. And again, that reality runs in both directions. Everyone can make music. Like that was Steve Jobs said that. Like people want to paint this as some sort of, oh, if Steve Jobs was in charge sort of idea. This is the articulation of the vision he put forward for the iPad.
Yeah.
It's not wrong.
Well, and it's a little bit ironic because as far as commodifying all of human creativity, it's not really Apple that's doing that as much as companies like Facebook, Spotify, Netflix, Amazon's doing it to businesses. Like Apple is the hardware that makes all that possible, but the hardware itself unlocks a lot of human creativity. It is just a
it's a good point. It's more an ad about tech in general,
exactly,
as opposed to necessarily like Apple specifically. That is a good distinction that I would agree.
Yeah,
with.
I mean, this is just a flashpoint that is interesting because of what it says about big tech generally. I mean, it reminds me of what you wrote about Spotify and Joe Rogan years ago, where you were saying agree or disagree with Spotify's decision making regarding this controversy. The environment surrounding speech has shifted, and companies from a strategic standpoint need to be mindful of that as they make decisions. There's a similar dynamic here where the environment shifted without Apple realizing it, and they released this tone deaf ad that triggers a lot of what people don't like about the net impact of tech on society. And watching people just flip out for now going on like 16 hours is pretty interesting, you know?
Maybe. I mean, I think there is something to that. I mean, I would say what I'm hearing from you is you're characterizing it. I think this is a fair response. I was talking to Twitter rogue DHH about this ad, and he's on this big excising Apple out of his life sort of thing. You know, he's going to Linux, God bless his soul, and all these like sorts of changes. And, you know, I think he was, you know, there's this bit about, he was making this point, Apple doesn't get the benefit of the doubt anymore. And I think there's a bit, you know, you're saying tech in general doesn't get the benefit of the doubt. There's this sort of angst in the air.
Yep.
And I think there's probably something about that going on. I'm not going to sort of dispute that from you. But I do think it's not even just an interpretation thing. Like, this is what has happened. Like, it's sort of a reality thing. And, you know, and I think, again, that's why I think it's so resonant. It's not just a mean-spirited, let's interpret this in the worst light possible. I think you can interpret it exactly as it's presented and sort of have that sort of introspective takeaway. It's an ad that's too true.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's the issue. And you know, this is one of the challenges of this environment that you're talking about, which I do agree with you about the sort of general more skepticism, is it's almost more difficult. You know, I was having this conversation with someone in tech sort of a while ago, and it took us a long time to even get to the point that I was trying to make.
Yeah.
Which was, you know, there's questions about like the impact of social media on teens, for example, right? And, you know, this person had a thought that there are certain ways of looking at the world and kids not being resilient and XYZ and, everyone looking for a manager to fix their problems and blah, 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 all these cultural things and certain things that have been issues on, say, like universities for years and years and years now being, you know, in the broader world. And it's like, look, no, there's an ideological sort of issue in that, you know, helicopter parenting, like all these sorts of like stuff in the air that sort of makes it worse. And to blame technology is to sort of miss the point. My argument in response is, and this has always been sort of my case about technology, is technology is a amoral force, but by saying it's amoral, that's not an excuse to dismiss or ignore its impact.
Yep.
If you build sort of channels for information to flow, and the information does flow, sure, you can point to the information, but that doesn't mean the channel isn't also a reason to point to why something may or may not be happening. Now, for this specific issue, it's pretty complicated, especially when you look at international rates versus U.S. rates. I don't necessarily want to sort of dive into that, rather than to note that as the environment has gotten more polarized, it's not just that people who are anti-tech are unfair. There's a bit where people in tech completely dismiss and act like nothing has changed in the broader sociological environment.
Yeah.
Technology does change things. If you want to go back, like the written word did change things. The printing press did change things. The internet computers did change things. The internet does change things. Mobile does change things. Now, that the fact that those changes are structural doesn't necessarily dictate the sort of ideology or view of the world that flows down those pipes, but to just blame one or the other is mistaken. And the two sides sort of differ in which they target. And the answer is sort of yes, all of the above.
Yeah, well, and I think one of the reasons that tech is such an easy scapegoat and does, I think, play a role in reshaping the way teens interact with the environment around them. But one of the reasons that is so convincing to people is because they look at their own relationships with technology and recognize that it's a little bit disordered. So then there's confirmation bias when they look at teens generally or kids and how they interact with technology. And the data can be manipulated in a bunch of different ways, but it feels true to a lot of people. And I think people in tech sometimes don't necessarily understand how many people have come to feel this way about tech on the outside. And days like this and reactions to that ad sort of underscore that there's a shift underway in terms of how people view these companies. And the commercial, you said it was pretty straightforward.
I want to jump in on that point.
Okay.
This is the other point that you said before that I do actually quite strongly disagree with.
Okay.
You earlier referenced big tech, and this time you just said the companies. And I think that's mistaken. It's not the companies. This is larger than that. These are structural changes in the way in which information flows. That like you don't go back. We don't look back to the 1400s and say the Gutenberg company changed the world. The printing press changed the world. I don't even know if there was a Gutenberg company or whatever else there might be. And I think that applies to this period as well. What has changed is the internet. You know, I used to get in this debate, you know, back in the day where, who's to blame for newspapers like demise, right? And everyone's like, you know, it could be very sort of tactical. It's Facebook's fault. And then you'd post a graph saying, well, no, actually, all of Facebook's revenue growth happened after all of newspapers' revenue growth collapsed. And then somebody will go back, it's Google's fault. And it's like, well, you know, there is actually more of an alignment there, but what's the driver? Is it Google, or is it the fact that Google was made possible by the internet, which made everything online, flattened out competition completely? There was no more geographic monopoly. Everything was accessible. And then you had such an abundance. Again, obviously, I'm talking my book here to a certain extent, that the entity that helped you sort that out made it, you know, became very valuable. That doesn't mean that entity was to blame. What happened first was the abundance. What happened first was the removal of distribution costs. What happened first was the ability to reach anyone in the world. That's the cause. And this is where I sort of flip around instead of, you know, it's bigger than that. It's like these are structural changes to the way humanity works, society works, all these sorts of things. And these companies are big by virtue of riding that wave.
Sure.
I think it ascribes way too much sort of responsibility and credit and causality to these companies for being the drivers of the cause. They're beneficiaries just as much as other people are victims.
Well, I can't quite get there. I think the companies benefited from people ascribing all the positives to technology and all the changes 10, 15 years ago. People loved all of these companies, and they've all become a lot more complicated. So I hear...
I'm trying to add Justine. Let's see here. I don't know why it's not letting me. This is going to be good though. Interesting, not letting me add her to join. Let's see. Let's see. Hi guys, I'm gonna have a good conversation, I think, with Justine Bateman in a minute. Although adding her has been quite interesting. Let me see. Justine. Pressing accept. How strange. I press accept. How come it's not adding? Anybody? Can anybody let me know? I'm pressing accept. Can anybody answer? Unable to join. Why would that be happening? Why would someone be unable to join? Can somebody inform me? It's all happening. I'm starting to believe in some Illuminati nonsense.
What the fuck?
I don't know, man. I was beginning to believe there were suspicious powers at play, keeping us from yammering.
That's right. How are you? I'm so glad to talk to you.
I'm good. Yeah.
Online comments for years. Stephen Myers Dominguez says hello.
Oh, love Stephen.
He's a good friend of mine.
Love Stephen. Yeah, I thank you thank you for joining me on what is not an official anything really, but sometimes I think you hole up inside during times like this and go, man, I really like what this person is saying. I have for a long time. It'd be nice to have a chat, and boy, do I not like using the word platform, but I think I tend to stay a little private, more or less the last probably 10 years, but if ever there was a time to say, hey, let's just turn on a camera and talk to somebody who seems to get it. And for those of you who don't know, who are watching, I'm on strike currently. I'm a 20-year member of the Writers Guild. And I am also SAG, but I don't really lead with that because I feel like it's not my place to speak for, a field that I do so little in. So I would leave that to more present voices. But and Justine, obviously, I'll let you kind of lay out, what you do now, maybe what you don't do, however you'd like to kind of summarize.
Hi, I'm Justine Bateman. Yeah, I was I'm a filmmaker, writer, director, producer, independent films. I was an actor in the past, and I was on the SAG negotiating committee and on the SAG board I was on the board from 2005, 2008, so on the negotiating committee 2007, 2008. And that's when we, Made for New Media was brand new, called streaming, but that's when that negotiation was going on. The Writers Guild was out on strike then. And so this round, I'm obviously picketing as a WGA member, but SAG, because of the posts I was putting out, when I knew SAG negotiations, I was like, you guys better understand, you know, I mean, I don't act anymore. But I just thought, wow, I really hope actors understand what's going on. So I started tweeting stuff out like in February. And then they asked me to my relationship with the leadership there, obviously, and know a couple people on the negotiating committee. And so they asked me if I'd come in and be a consultant on the AI demands. And Duncan Crabtree, Ireland, I have to say, him and his legal were on it. I mean, they really, everything I was going to recommend, they were already covered. They were already, you know, thinking that direction as well. So that was great. Yeah, so I've just, every time there's been a proposal or I've been there with, you know, made a speech to the AMPTP when the proposals were first made, to sort of give them perspective on what's at stake for any of the performers. And yeah, I've seen all the proposal counters and stuff in that arena.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to, you know, just quickly, you know, say I think your voice has been particularly appreciated, because I think a lot of this stuff, and correct me if I'm wrong this whole time, but from my perspective, I think a lot of these things end up kind of people notice them when they hit sort of a consumer level product of some kind. I think like ChatGPT, if you think about these things like that, that's accessible to people. They can wrap their head around what that is. I think there are some people who are a little more immersed in the fields of like, not just tech, but you can go into like neuroscience, you can go into philosophy, you can go into all these things, these big picture ways of looking at the world, who also actually cross over into this industry and go, I think there's something down the road that we need to be worried about. So it is refreshing and always nice to hear people kind of sounding the alarms. You know, even if you know, and maybe I don't know if you think this about yourself, but I think sometimes the early alarms can come off as a little, from outsiders' perspective, a little either hysterical or conspiratorial or whatever you want to call it, when it doesn't quite make sense yet. But I think even if you go back to the last strike, people were not aware of what streaming was going to be. And so,
well, I mean, I was definitely in the negotiating room during that negotiation. I was working already as a writer and producer in the digital space. And I was in the negotiating room saying, the AMPTP was telling us back then, and people remember this when YouTube was pretty young. They had a 3-minute restriction on upload because their servers couldn't handle more than that. We didn't have long form thing online yet.
Right.
But just to give people a context, and I was working in that space already with brand stuff, and I said, listen to me, to the negotiation, that you have to get real estate in this area. This is just another way to distribute things.
Right.
And if you don't get real estate right now, you'll never get it.
Right.
So they got a little piece of real estate, and what's happened is you build your skyscraper on top of that little piece of real estate, and you try to expand it as you go up. It's fucking hard.
Yeah.
And even today, this is still 15 years later. Writers Guild, a lot of our asks have to do with that. Right. And Screen Actors Guild. So on AI, I said, this is non-negotiable. These are protections you have to have. They're non-negotiable.
Right.
You have to have consent and compensation. Some people want to sell their image like whatever. You can't keep them from. The default has to be no.
Right. Of course. Of course. And I think that's a whole other economy that maybe we'll get some insight in when somebody goes, okay, what is my likeness worth, and in perpetuity, what would that value be? And those are numbers that I can't even imagine. And I'm sure that is the reality of the future somewhere down the line for somebody. I mean, I think if we've learned anything in the last especially decade, as far as transparently, like, people like money, Yeah. And I think that protecting, one thing I find interesting is when you go back and say, hey, I issued these warnings, like, I don't blame anybody who, you know, says, oh, who didn't believe that, or who didn't kind of recognize what was happening. I think that creative people in general can often be taken advantage of because of a lack of insight when it comes to, in certain ways, tech, if that doesn't really overlap with your job that much, but also just the finance space, also sort of, you know, the corporate machine. I think there is a naivete that's actually like, well, of course, like I don't blame anybody for not recognizing the economy that's shaped for the last, you know, 10, 20 years online. Like, I don't know if that should be every single person's responsibility, but I do know that when you don't know, you get taken advantage of.
Well, and as far as I'm concerned, like I don't need people to understand it. I don't need everyone to understand it. I don't even need the AMPTP to understand it. Labor leaders that represent. I don't need them to understand it. I don't need them to have sympathy for any of these actors. No, we just need to say, and this is how all negotiation goes, as far as I'm concerned. Just say no. It's like a non-emotional no. Yeah. No. For our conditions. You want to meet these conditions? Great. You don't want to meet these conditions? We're going on strike, or I'm not doing the job, or whatever it is. It's just non-emotional like that.
If you could, like, I know we're coming into this with sort of maybe some pre-existing knowledge of our own fields, but if there's somebody listening who is sort of coming in at a zero, like if you had to issue kind of one, I guess, a warning, or broadly speaking, what AI, what the AMPTP's use of AI is attempting to do and take away from actors, I welcome you to lay that out.
So for anyone who doesn't know, and I have a computer science degree too from UCLA that I went to school, college later. I got it in 2016. So just to say, like, it wasn't back when they were we were programming on pieces of paper and stuff. So okay, so generative AI, it's basically, just imagine, I'm really going to simplify it. It's like a box or a blender, something, right? It doesn't function without putting something in it. You know, the blender, if you turn it on and there's nothing in it, you got to pour it out, it's the air, right? So you have this blender, and you're going to feed into it. What do you want this blender to do? You want it to write a script? You got to feed into it a bunch of scripts. You want it to write books? Feed into a lot of books, films, medical reports, political positions. You want it to write a bill? You feed all the political bills you can find. Okay. Then you give it a task. You say, I want you to write a bill that deals with the homeless problem. I mean, if AI can fix something that actually is an issue right now, that'd be terrific. So then it'll spit out what is kind of an amalgamation of what you fed it. So imagine all this stuff in a blender. It gives you a little Frankenstein scoop of that smoothie, okay? And that's your answer. And if it can find the answer, it'll make it up. It's highly unreliable. Now, put that into the arts, and you can see the offensive thing is, it's not just that it's going to replace what we love to do for a living, but it will replace what we love to do for a living with our own work. So it'll take your scripts and scripts, everyone else's scripts, and throw it into the blender and say, well, I want a script. It's going to be an action film that's mostly Hispanic people, that takes place in Hawaii, and there's some comedy, whatever the prompts are, right? And there are a lot of cars involved. I don't know. And then it'll just spit that script out based on, can't do it without our old work. And the same thing. There's ways to do that. You can either digitally take the digital representation of a specific person, you can see it's them, or you can feed them all into the blender and spit out, and you can do prompts like, I want to give me a character, it's 30 years old, male, accent, and walks with a limp, whatever. And let's just spit it out. But it only can spit it out if it has ingested a bunch of Brad Pitt performances and other actors' performances, and then it puts this thing together.
Yeah, and obviously with I mean, as of right now, as far as regulation, no, or as far as I know, no rules around the copyright of what it learns from, essentially.
Isn't it amazing? We're talking about studios that in the past would send the FBI to your house to put you in jail for downloading one illegal, one of their copyright, right?
Yeah, God forbid you have like The Lion King on a hard drive.
Now I think they're wanting this to go out of control, so that by third parties, other, video, generative AI companies, so they can turn around to all of these unions and say, you have to let us do it. Look, it's already out of control. Really, they should have legal teams going to each one of these and saying, I want a list of all the films that you fed into this. And if I see any of my copyrighted films on there, you got to delete this entire training set. But they're not doing that. Not that I've heard of, not that I know of.
No, and I think that's where we might get to an interesting place when it comes to lawsuits, and obviously the results of those lawsuits. But I also think, one thing I've been thinking a lot about, but oddly I've been thinking about for 10 years is how we got to this moment, right? Like this, what the internet and social media in particular, and the sort of devaluing of privacy and credit and all of these things that kind of used to be considered, I guess, if there is such a thing as manners in business. I mean, again, the studios would have preferred, to own everything. Suddenly the internet comes along and you have aggregation and you have sort of this, there's a lot of young people who've been raised with a much different idea of when you credit, what privacy means, what copyright means. It's been this unregulated space. So in so many ways, we've kind of laid this foundation for this stuff to fly, right? From a consumer's perspective, from somebody's perspective sitting at home, I think that, like, one thing I kind of want to tell people, like, sitting at home, is like, it's not just unfair to the people whose content is used, whose face is used, whose name is used, maybe whose voice is used, but what a lot of these corporations are saying is the consumer is stupid, and they'll like this garbage that is churned out at a high volume. And if I'm a consumer as well, right? I don't want to be thought of that way. I don't want somebody to think, hey, we can get rid of people and we can steal content and we can regurgitate it back to you in a lesser form, and not just do that off the data that we've made the content from, but off the data we've stolen from you for the last 15 plus years on the internet. You've said what you like, right? Yeah. You didn't realize that all of a sudden we're going to hit this place in the future where I have basically donated my brain to big tech, and they're going to give me back a sort of watered down, mass produced version of stuff I've looked at with my eyes. So obviously, like, data harvesting and all of that comes in. Like, we're really at a place where all of this stuff has hit, I think, I mean, it's not just a critical mass when it comes to, like, producing product, but I think, thank God, it feels like some people are kind of waking up a little, like putting the pieces together and going, oh, they're stealing from the people who make the product. They're stealing from me, essentially, because they've spied on me forever and know what I like. And, do I think that there are ethical uses of, like, targeted ads and things? I mean, if you're going to say, hey, a good faith small business, how do they get their word out? But we're really at the mercy of people willing to reverse engineer at all costs, and
very, very customized to you,
right,
through a, you can see, if anybody wants, you can look up, there's a adage.com article about WP, that's a ad agency conglomerate. So they've eaten a lot of the, Publicis Group is another one that owns a lot of ad agencies. That consolidation happened many years ago. But WPP has a deal with NVIDIA. NVIDIA produces GPUs, somebody tell me in the comments, graphic processing units, I think stands for. Anyway, imperative to have for graphic processing on it. And they are going to be, they've been working with them for a long time, but now it's really a firm partnership, and NVIDIA is going to be doing all the structure, the methodology, the algorithms, so forth, to make ads for WPP's brands, and feed custom ads to everybody. And I looked at that and I went, Jesus Christ, the brands in about 10 minutes are going to look at WPP and go, what do we have? Graphic processing units. Thanks, guys. They're going to think, what do we need you for?
Right.
And they're going to go straight to NVIDIA. And if NVIDIA, and I'm sure they are taking me, and everybody, I encourage you to look at what NVIDIA is doing, what NVIDIA stock is doing. This is a $1 trillion company, I think, okay? Investors are throwing money at the company because they know they are core to all the generative AI. So I bet NVIDIA has been taking meetings with studios now. I assume that. And if they do the same thing with them, then it's going to be, then NVIDIA is going to go, Disney, what do I need you for? Warner Brothers, what do I need you for? They'll buy their library.
Right.
Copyright. And then goodbye.
Right.
Because the studios think, they thought they could compete with Netflix, and they lost their life. Now, if they think they can compete with these video tech companies, Jesus Christ, this business is going to burn down. And I don't mean that I do mean the structure of this business is going to be later. I think we are going to be here for the end of this 100-year. But this is, I want to encourage people with this, though. On the other side of this is going to be something remarkable. It's going to be something really raw, really, in fact, the only way filmmakers are going to be able to compete with the very, very good generative AI going to come out is to do something super real and raw. The last thing I'll say about that, and I don't know that we'll finally get like a new genre, like we haven't had a genre in the arts of since the 90s. So one last thing about this, generative AI is not only going to affect or is affecting the entertainment business, it's going to affect all branches of all areas of their lives. So they're going to be called, and I encourage everybody, when you're with your family, put your phones in the other room, get together with your family and decide on a password. So when somebody calls with a clone voice of yours, because it's easy, I think Apple phones right now, it's clone a voice. So you're having coffee with somebody at the next table has their phone on, and they record, I think, 15 minutes of your voice, and they can clone your voice. Have a password. So when you get a call from your daughter, your mother, your aunt saying, wire me $5,000 right now, you can say, what's the password?
Right.
And if they come up with a password, then you can hang up and not worry that they're in danger. Okay. So
By the way, I've had this conversation with my aunt, who is a bit of a surrogate mother.
Don't text it to see.
Oh, no. But I mean the conversation about
I'm saying it for other people. Like, don't text
the future of scamming, because ultimately, ultimately who uses this technology usually first and most are people who understand, here's how I make money from this. And that's what I found so fascinating about so much of sort of even the e-commerce and algorithm space of the last 10 years is most people don't walk around and at every turn of the corner think, how can I make money from this, right? How can I make money from this turn of phrase? How can I make money from the fact that 3 more people Googled a word today than they did yesterday? And what breaks my heart is that it requires kind of regular people, in order to protect themselves, to jump through hoops that you shouldn't have to jump through, right? You shouldn't have to like constantly be aware, hey, I downloaded an app, it's taking my picture. What are the hypothetical repercussions down the road of this app's use of my picture? Does it know where I am in my house? Like, it really, it actually breaks my heart.
Or like Alexa, right? Listening to everything. People go, oh, it's only listening to you after you say Alexa. And I'm like, how do you think it hears that you're saying Alexa? It's listening to everything.
Yeah.
When you go in the fridge, when you eat.
Yeah, it's fascinating, it's scary, but I also think like it's worth saying we are long past this being something new, right? Like everything we see online, everything that you click on, everything that sort of gets to your feed, it feels like you're doing something organic. It feels like you're receiving sort of the world's truth. But I think we've seen this across, across obviously politics, but also just the way media is generated to get to you online, right? So like, do we want that in these spaces that we used to think of as like, here's this organic half hour, here's this 2 hours that didn't just design itself for me based on data it got yesterday. And, I don't know how to have this conversation in like a corporate setting or how to make anyone in a corporate setting have it. But obviously, apart from all of the sort of ethical, what are we doing here with tech, like the existential conversation that comes with all this is, I think even if people who said, hey, you guys are like privileged writers, privileged actors, the idea that
for everything I have,
yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah.
I worked for everything I've got.
Yeah.
And I continue to
Yeah.
do. And if you add it up, how much I got paid to do my last film,
right,
be about $1 a day.
Right.
I spent 18 months getting the money together for it. I had to hold it over COVID. And then I had to do my own. In fact, I made like negative $10,000 when you add, because then I had to do promotion myself. It's so fucking hard to make a film. So for me, there's no privilege about it. This is the path I'm on. This is the path.
Right.
I tried to not be on it. I mean, anybody who's
Yeah.
called, if you've tried to get off it and then it pulls you back like a rubber band. But it's fucking, I love it, but it's hard. And I worked hard for everything, every single thing I've got. Have I been in lucky situations? And I've made the most of it. But everybody gets a basket of skills and talents and opportunity.
Right.
And those opportunities, are you open to these chances? Yes. So I've tried to, take advantage in a maximum way every opportunity I've gotten. And that's hard work. It's hard work, prepared, and it's just doing everything you need to do to, for me, directing and writing is a service position. You do everything you need to do to make that project the best thing possible. So I'm not into the privilege thing. I fucking worked my ass off. So
No, you know what? I'm with you. I think I fluctuate between, hey, I know that compared to most people, I am lucky. I also know the reality is I've seen my pay and I've seen, the way the compensation per, let's say, hour or the energy of work I've put out has gone downhill for the last decade plus. But I also know, hey, I have this 2-bedroom house that I'm very lucky to have. People that I started with who started maybe, 15, 20 years before me, perhaps the work that they did equivalent to the work I've done got them a big giant house. And now I see, obviously, the people I've worked with for the last 10 years who are essentially just getting by and unable to save in a way that was sort of once a given. And, again, I understand that the kind of work that this is maybe feels rarefied, but fair share of profits is not a rarefied thing, right?
Well, and that whole thing, I think one of the biggest changes that's happened in corporate America, and this is why I think the public is like, we get it.
Right.
You guys are talking about, look at you, Teamsters with UPS right now. UPS is about to have, I think it's like 340,000 Teamsters, like go out into the streets. How bad do you have to fuck up as a corporation to allow something like that to happen?
Right.
And I think, look, we've always had big corporate America and those who are making like outsized money compared with others. But I think what's happened in the last 15 years is this, and you touched on it earlier about like the treatment of art and artists and all of this has just been degraded. But the treatment of the people who have the company with the workers, I feel like there's this mentality now that like, oh, well, we came up with this thing and you guys just, we came up with this house and you guys just paint the rooms. You didn't have anything. It's like, no, you only have a business because we built the house.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't, you didn't come up with the house. You didn't come up with the arrangement of rooms or anything. We came up with that.
Right.
You spent the money and you're going to sell it. Fantastic. To recognize that kind of partnership. I mean, that word is thrown around a lot in the business, but I think it's that. I think it's this mentality by these, and I think maybe tech brought it in, that expanded it. And again, I love tech. I have a computer science degree, but
yes,
this thinking like, well, we came up with this thing, and you guys are just like the programming monkeys that just make it happen.
Right.
It's like, really? And you're all interchangeable. And they brought that kind of mentality into our business,
right?
Which is, it's mind-boggling. It's
right.
mind-boggling. Like, you don't have a company without our work. I mean, Netflix is a website.
Right.
Netflix is a website. That's it.
Yeah.
If it doesn't have all of our material on its shelves, so to speak, it is an empty website you're never going to visit twice. And that's how it has to be thought of. And that's why they don't want to, so they're making, what is Zaslav getting, like over $400 million for? This is just baffling.
Yeah. I mean, I think what's also interesting is, like, I could point the finger at every CEO, but also know that every one of them could be replaced tomorrow, and they're still going to do the same thing because they are not paid to be popular in our eyes, right? They are not paid for creative people to look at them and go, "Oh, great, they're the king of entertainment." They're paid for shareholders to be able to believe, hey, you are maxing out our growth, right? You are maxing out not just profits, growth, and that's a big conversation I think to be had, which is there is no conservative, profit earnings anymore. It is what has growth, what has sort of this exponential nonstop growth, and if it doesn't, sell it for parts essentially.
But it's that Morgan, the exponential, unlimited, massive unicorn growth, like that's not sustainable.
Right.
That's insane. That's like
right.
Starting a romantic relationship with someone and going like, wow, all this stuff that has happened this month, we're in love and everything. We want that to happen again, like compounded interest every month for as long as our relationship. It doesn't work that way. No.
Right. And I'm like 100% willing to, I say, hey, yeah, we have had a giant shift for many of these same reasons, but a giant shift in the types of media that have been sort of consumed by the most eyeballs. Like, I'm not naive to the rise of, generally speaking, you go podcasts, YouTube, sort of digital media, what was alternative media, all these spaces. It doesn't mean let's devalue this space that is the last place to, create stories that shape people's lives. And I don't mean like if you're like adult and you've had it, but like think about like what film and television does for people, right? Yep. When you are seen, when you are told, here's like, I mean, it is what art does. And I think to the point you were making about what's on the other side of this, what I do find beautiful, and I do find kind of, it's not bittersweet, because I really do believe we can, with solidarity and not bending. When I say not bending, and this sounds like bullshit, I am willing to lose it all. I am not going to be complicit in the generation that said, hey, this doesn't matter. I got my 2-bedroom house. Yeah. Go after yourself. I lose it. I'll take my house. I do it. I don't care. I will hold out. And I will say, and this is not like a bragging thing, but like this interrupted a project that I cared more about maybe than any other, that had maybe more momentum than any other, that I was so thrilled about. Yeah. And there was not a question in my soul of like, and the end. Right now, the end of that, and we're on to this collective movement. But what you were saying about the art on the other side of this, I do think it will make a lot of people think more about art. I think even if this, no matter what happens after today or after next month or next year, I do think having that existential conversation, if only with yourself, of why am I doing this? Why am I here? You know, some people can point a finger and say, hey, Morgan, you've written on some silly stuff. I love silly stuff. I love comedy. In part, why I have, I wouldn't say disappeared, but backed off from being a public person for the last decade is I didn't like how the direct-to-consumer marketing of personality made me feel online. And I realized, hey, that's not for me. This space is not for me. I don't begrudge anybody else succeeding off of it. But like, I just like to feel like a person, do creative things, be grateful that, you know, it sort of got me somewhere. But I think we are, not to be all over the map, but I do think sort of the existential conversation, the tech conversation, the conversation about, you know, corporate greed and the conversation about art can all be had within this space.
Yeah, I mean, but although I will say, tech needs to back the fuck off. Like they've been center stage. When you think about all the aspects of our lives, education, healthcare, spirituality. Right. I mean, there are many, many, many others, right? And tech is part of that. Okay. Right. So great. You made some things convenient. This is great. We can do something like this. You know, emails are more convenient. I'm glad Google has a search. I mean, in the 90s, I had yellow pages for websites. I swear to God, I wish I still had it. That was the only way you could find, like, where should you even go? Right. So terrific. But they've been center stage for the last 15, 20 years. Okay, get the fuck off the center of the stage. Move to the side, because now you can see it's getting into arenas that nobody fucking wants in here. I've got it like suggesting my text response to somebody. It's like, thank you very much. I can respond to my friend text. I don't need a fucking suggestion. I don't have an IQ of fucking 20. I can come up with a response. You know, it's things like that. It's like an annoying assistant going like, do you want me to get you some food? Do you want me to eat it for you? It's like, no, I don't. I want you to shut up and go over in the corner or go home. I don't need you today. Yeah. Tech needs to back off now. It's getting into areas where it's not needed. Absolutely. And I think
and that, by the way, I just interrupt what you have brought up, and this has come from conversation with friends and stuff, and there's people in the chat saying, well, what if it can cure cancer? And it's like, great.
Well, go for it.
Let it mine all the data in the world to cure cancer.
Go do that. That'd be
right.
But get out of, tech should solve a problem. It's not we don't have a problem in the arts of not having enough writers or actors or directors and stuff. So we don't need it here. We don't need it here. In fact, for me as a filmmaker, I'm never going to touch it. I've no interest whatsoever because it's going to go in the opposite direction of where I want to go. Right. I want to get more real, more raw, more innovative, have stronger connections as a filmmaker with the audience. And AI is a total opposite direction. People go, well, AI is the future. It is the opposite of the future. Right. It is regurgitation of the past, and frankly, a regurgitation of the 20th century mostly.
Right, and a regurgitation not just of what is best, but of what's most popular. Well, right? So you're looking at.
Let me say this, though. You know, we were talking earlier about, you know, audiences sort of being primed for this sort of thing, and look at all these reboots and rehashings and sequels and everything. Like Fast and Furious 10, like that's a TV series at this point, right? I mean, people enjoy it, they go to see it, but 10 of them. So we've now, for the last, like pretty solidly, last 15 years, been watching a lot of reboots, a lot of like, well, let's do it then with a Hispanic cast, or let's do it with all women, or let's do it like, with some exception. There's been some good work over that period of time, but for the most part, it's been a regurgitation. And you look at that, well, you know, AI can automate that.
Right. So, which also, by the way, if you are pushing for, hey, I don't see myself represented in media, this is good, there's a version of this for me, it's devaluing the pursuit of that project, right? It's devaluing the pursuit of, you know, if they say, hey, I want to see this movie with all women and tech can make that for me, that's not the goal I want to achieve, right? When I'm saying I want to see this movie with all women. So it is this It is this completely diluted version, and it will be nonetheless presented to people as, oh, here we are. We've given you something that we deserve a pat on the back for.
But it's a rape of art.
Right.
It's a rape of art.
Right.
It's bad for the artists. It's bad for the audiences. But exactly what you said. They will then, just like they're going to customize ads for AI based on all of your viewing habits and all your website, history. They're going to do the same thing with shows. And what they're going to do, and this is something I wish that DGA had put in their AI demands, but maybe get it done through legislation. They're going to, let's say you watch panda documentaries and Hong Kong action films. So they're going to give you, they're going to give you films that combine these two things, right? And they'll see like, oh, on social media, you're really an advocate for, the Hispanic farm workers. And so we're going to, or you watch a lot of comedies that have African Americans in them or something. Well, they'll find something that you do the most of, and us, you watch the most of, and then they're making you these custom things. And then what about this library of all these old films? They'll start taking these old films, like Citizen Kane, like Wizard of Oz, and they'll just make everybody black. But they will present themselves as, hi, we are altruistic. Yeah. We care about these things. We want to make sure that everybody who's unrepresented is seeing everything. Or they'll make a new film that's not specifically customized to you. It's the new, Die Hard 15 or something, but it's slightly customized to you, and then slightly customized to me, and then slightly customized. So none of us are watching the same film. It's just what you said, like that's not art. That's visual music. And by the way,
it's noise, it's distraction.
But it's not even, do you know that the most popular note that writers, showrunners, maybe you've had this, get on Netflix and maybe other streamers is, hey, it's not second screen enough. Meaning, my laptop and my phone, the viewer's phone and laptop is primary screen. You got to make this second screen on the on the TV, because if it distracts somebody from their primary screen, scrolling through Instagram or something, or watching us do this, if they look up and go, oh wait, what just happened? Now they've noticed that it's on. Oh shit, they'll turn it off. So,
and by the way, what is
down the originality of it, because it's distracting viewers from scrolling through social media. I'm just like, this is absolutely the wrong direction. If somebody looks away from my film and they look back up in 20 minutes and they're confused and they haven't missed anything, that's 20 minutes I should have cut out.
No, believe me, I'm with you, and I think it's I think it's wild, but I also think it's very interesting that the shows that tend to capture a lot of people in a way that is innovative, right? Like, oh, I haven't seen this before. This is so good that we're all talking about it. The shows that are most likely to get you to put your phone away and watch the screen are innovative, are groundbreaking in some way, are incredible in some way, right? So what they're generating is not that, certainly, right? If at best they're saying, hey, here's a beat for beat formula of how this story laid out, we will give this back to you, right? Maybe we will ask a writer to go in and have 3 of these people sound like real people at best, but they're not giving you innovation, because it cannot give you what does not exist yet.
You'll never get AI if everything's just AI. Society never gets anything new.
Nothing.
So if you had AI 100 years ago, 75 years ago, I'm not going to get my dates right here, but imagine if it was before jazz, before rock and roll, before cubism, or pointillism, all these art movements that happened in the 20th century, we would have had none of them. No innovation, nothing new, nothing comes out of AI. It's a regurgitation of the and the only
it also removes what to me is the most exciting part of making anything. I mean, I think for me, the making anything really comes in like writing jokes, exploring, like, why are these words more interesting than these other words? That's always been the, it was very cool in high school. I've always been that's really been my jam. Why do these words sound good? In short, but like, it takes the mystery away, and that's the best part. The discovery and the mystery and all these things. And if you want to just take data and look at a computer and have it tell you, you know, hey, here is what more people looked at than another thing, give it back to them. Congratulations, have a cool job. Don't strip what has been sort of integral in the shaping and forming and inspiring of like humanity. I'm not being hyperbolic at all here.
You said it exactly. Bringing AI into the arts, or bringing AI into a student's world where they're going to have AI write their essays, or bringing AI into like, let me write your emails for you. Let me write your letters to other people, or your text. You're trying to stop humans from being human. You're trying to stop human expression.
Right.
And here's the thing. I think art tubes through which, you know, God, the universe, magic, whatever you want to call it, comes through into society. Okay. Those are like called, those who are, you know, an artist, like, can't help it. This is just what you do. And you look at throughout history, how things that have come through artists, through musicians, through painters, filmmakers, everything, into society, how it's changed things, how it's brought new ideas into their minds, new perspectives on how they can look at their own life. And you cut that off, and it's like death to a society. And not just but invention too.
Right.
Invention of objects, of ideas, of education, of everything. I mean, there's so many things we've vilified now too, like being an intellect. I mean, anyway, that's a whole other topic.
No,
but my God,
I mean, it's
brains.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like, haven't you had a journalist ask you, like, well, wouldn't you want to use, you know, AI to like help you, you know, go, you know where to go next in the script? And I go, oh yeah, well, I've got this other thing called my fucking brain, and that's what I use to come. And I think really it reveals that there are a lot of people who just fundamentally don't understand how artists come up with anything, and that's okay. Right? That's okay. I don't understand. Look, I didn't get the card to be a musician. I'm not gifted. I know how to play instruments, but I'm not gifted as a musician. I'm gifted as a writer, director, actress, even though I don't do that anymore, producer. But I didn't get the gift for, I didn't even get the gift for coding. I worked my ass off to get that degree, right?
Well, apparently you don't need that anymore, because you can just prompt.
I learned how to do that. Anyway, but I don't understand, but I can respect musicians that is coming through their tube into society. But this, like, people going like, well, who needs a writer to do this? We'll just get AI to do it. Or don't you want AI to do it for you? It's like, I live for this.
Right.
This is why I like work my ass off for all this, because I love it. Because I love feeling that thing coming through me. You know, when you really nail it on a joke or a line or a scene, and you look back at it the next day, you're like, who wrote that? I mean, I don't mean we're channeling, but like, you're just like, fuck, it happened. You know what I mean? When it clicks in, that feeling, I'm not going to give that feeling away, no fucking way.
Believe me, I'm with you, and I'm with you on the music front, because I oddly, I've been going back to a lot of songs from my adolescence and a lot of music from that period, and just thinking like, what would I have done? What would I have done without these incredible artists, like walking me through? And I'm going to go down to say, like, and I am not like an astute, I don't know music the way like some of my peers are great musicians. But what would I have done without them kind of walking me through, let's say 13 to 22? Yeah. Let's like go through that period. And like some of my best friends are musicians. They're incredible. I'm like blessed to know them. But what I've also seen is we have trailed them in this AI fight, right? Like prior to us, their business went under, right? Prior to us, AI started writing songs. They don't have the union representation in songwriting that we do, which is also why I think we're a little bit more of this last stand. And what makes me nervous is that I think I do and am able to appreciate music that wasn't written purely organically, right? Like I go, oh, that song's fun. And then I'll have real musician friends say, it's a pop song. It's sort of designed around an algorithm to get you to like it. It's the stuff that I say to people. So, and I'm like, then I get mad. Then I go, well, I don't want that. I don't take my brain and give me, like, once you know that you're the mark, once you know that you're the product, don't you want to fight back?
It's a scam. That's why I think people will be, that's why I think there will, that's part of why I think there'll be a new, because don't forget, and I got to go, well, like,
no, we're edging up on an hour. So great.
Like 5 minutes, I got to go. But I think that is why people, after the novelty wears off of AI films and the novelty of them putting themselves in face replacement and all this sort of thing, I think, don't forget, AI is not just happening in this business, but all these other businesses. And I think they'll start feeling, and I said already about like scam. They're going to reject the AI. They're also going to reject the content. Even if you said, oh no, this film or this series, you know, was done before this AI explosion, and they're going to go, I don't care. It seems like AI. And they're going to only trust things that seem really human and really raw and really real. So no filters, no plastic surgery, nothing. Otherwise they're going to be like you were, like, well, wait, I don't know what I can trust. Unless it sounds really human. I think like I'm already like, when I see articles online now, I'm like, shit, I don't know if AI wrote this or a person wrote this. And I just,
and I think, by the way, there are in certain fields, because I think that I guess there has been a descent into sort of lesser quality stuff being sort of shoved in our face because it's cheaper, obviously. But now that has sort of set this bar for, is this just they didn't want to pay a better person to make this, or is this just a computer regurgitating back to me? And again, that gets back to the last 15 years of getting to this place where you can say to somebody online who's maybe 25 years old, and I do like value you young folks a lot, but you can say something like, hey, that's stolen. It might be wiser to give credit. And the response is often, it doesn't matter. That's how it works here. Basically, doesn't matter. That's how it works here. So I don't know. I just think the more that we make noise, and people can bring up all these. You can bring up McLuhan. You can bring up these sort of like, you know, this is the end of the world, or we needed to stop caring about money, or these sort of broad statements of it all comes down to capitalism. Well, surely, but individuals need to know they're allowed to get up and say, hey, this is not what I want. This is not what I want.
Not what I want. And this, and also a couple of things I want to say just at the end here. This thing we're about to go into, or that we're in already, this generative AI thing, like I see somebody was texting about education too. Like, they're like, oh, it's great. This will be customized to you. You know, you don't need professors anymore. You don't need teachers anymore. I'm like, this just sounds so horrifying to me. So, but I can't stop it. All I can do is tell my fellow, you know, film workers on the beach, or to anybody else, the tsunami's here. It's breaking over our heads, so that they're not caught unawares. I can't stop it. But here's the thing about this, let's say this generation. I don't even know what that means. The internet, growing up with the internet only, it's very focused on retweeting, reposting, reworking, commenting on other people's stuff.
Right.
And maybe your stuff and other people are retweeting. A lot of blending together, reworking, and then all these sequels. And, you know, there's been, think about innovation in the last 20 years. I'm not talking about tech innovation. I mean, in anything. What new stuff has happened?
Right.
And I think
or happened to a broad audience. Like, I feel like everything that I found to be innovative, that I found to be special, was in some internet version of a speakeasy, some little corner where very interesting people, very interesting pockets of artists were making something cool. You know, I mean, I found digital artists during sort of the NFT boom, where everyone's going after, we're trashing the headline making, whether it's an altcoin or an NFT or whatever. Meanwhile, I find these kids who are using translation apps to do to collaborate on digital art that is dollars, right? That is just, hey, I felt like, oh, I'm just tipping an artist in Colombia. That's all I'm doing right now. Like, there are these pockets, but they're never going to be the people that you know, unfortunately, that's not what you're going to find out about during the Super Bowl, right? That's not what you're going to find out about on the front page of your streaming app.
It's not going to, I mean, like I said earlier, like, the arts are supposed to help change, or supposed to help open people, who's supposed to help set society in new directions, you know, new direction. I'm saying new stuff. That's nothing really new has happened in the last 20 years. Not like, I mean, my God, I was born in 1966. The 60s, bunch of new stuff happened. 70s, bunch of new stuff happened. 80s, bunch of new stuff happened. 90s, bunch of new stuff happened.
Yeah.
2000
now.
Yeah. Oh, social media.
And social media. What is social media? Is media responding to media, responding to media, responding to media.
I mean, you know, like, somebody just posted, texted about students turning in papers written in a ChatGPT. And I tweeted this out at one point. I'm like, if you're using ChatGPT to write your papers that you need to turn in order to get that degree, whatever job you get because of that degree, or whatever job you're applying for to get that, ChatGPT can do it. Think about it. And the only way you're really going to be able to differentiate yourself when it comes to hiring, why should they hire you instead of ChatGPT, is because you have innovative ideas. But that's also been sort of pressed down on people, to not have innovative ideas, because it's so easy to, like, point to someone and, you know, publicly in social media and go, they're not doing it the right way, they're doing it the wrong way, you know, canceling or whatever, some measure of that, you know. Like, there's never been so much fucking conformity.
Yeah.
You know?
If I can say, I know if I can say one thing to, if there's like young artists, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No.
I was going to say, if there's young people out there who are in any kind of an existential, as I know I would. I mean, I always, like, thank God when I started doing this, going and telling jokes, I almost am grateful that I was told day one, it's over. You're never going to make any money. And I was like, it's the best thing to be told when you start the thing you love to do and you're driving to open mics, is this will never work. And you go, oh, okay, well then like, I can't lose anything, right? But, like, now it must be so hard to watch all of this stuff regurgitated online, all of this stuff sort of churned out, targeted at the right people, targeted in the right way for clicks and for sort of ad-backed revenue. And then ultimately you get influence, you leverage that influence for, like, brand deals and equity and all these things, right? It must be so hard if all you're like, I just love drawing, I just love painting. You still do it. A smaller audience, a lesser audience is a valuable audience. No audience is a valuable audience.
Yeah,
like, man, we have to start being okay in the middle.
Why does everything have to turn into a career? You know what I mean? That's what, like, that's what Etsy kind of did to us. Like, all these people have these, it's so beautiful. So I got to go now, but it's so beautiful to just kind of have a hobby, you know, just like, oh, you really like to make, you know, little figures out of, you know, rocks and pipe cleaners.
Yep.
You have to turn it into a fucking business. Like, just enjoying it. It's okay. Or maybe you like to play violin. You don't have to, you know, now make, you know, TikTok videos and put out an album, and Jesus Christ, just enjoy it, you know?
I mean, I don't show people my doodles. They're lucky. Hours of doodling.
All right. Well, great talking to you.
It was wonderful talking to you. Have a nice night. I know you're off to what are you off to Midjourney to steal some.
Holy shit.
We'll figure it out. You know, the end of the day, worst case scenario, 5 people gather in a room and go, "What happened?"
And if, you know, people are asking like, what can we do to support, you know, the business? I would say, like, man, just push back. You know, I don't know, email, not only in the entertainment business but everywhere. Like, are they, you know, are they trying to get rid of all your tellers at your bank, your insurance company?
Yep.
You could go all online, so you don't have a insurance agent anymore. Whatever it is, push back. Tell them, I don't like this anymore. I did this for a really small grocery store near us, and they took out half the tellers and put automatic. And I just called them and left a message just saying, hey, I really like this grocery store, and like, I get you putting in these, you know, in a large store, the automatic, or I'm not saying this is the self-serve cashier. But don't do it at this store. This store is tiny. We know these cashiers. Like, this is like a neighborhood grocery store. Like, we wait in line now to deal with the cashiers instead of using the self-serve things. So cashiers, you know, you took half of them out, put them back.
You know, where you notice humanity being removed from places, as opposed to sort of like let yourself start to accept that new life. You know,
hey, I don't, you know, and maybe you won't get a change, but at least you put one vote in. You put one vote in to say, like, I don't like this. I don't want it.
Or you learn how to use the register like I did at my local liquor store. I go to Hillhurst Liquor. You might see me. I fill in an emergency. I was like, Cammie, just
fun.
It's the best store in the world. And if you guys go in Los Feliz, it's not an ad, but Hillhurst Liquor on Hillhurst Boulevard. The owner, Cammie, worked every day of the first 2 years of the pandemic. He's absolutely the greatest, and I know how to use the register and can check you in and out, so you might see me there.
I love it. Well, for everyone, this is not going to be the last chapter, the generative AI inferno. It's a chapter, but there will be another chapter after it. It's happening. It's going to happen because there are too many greedy people that want to eliminate their overhead, which is a lot of it's human capital and human labor. And it's going to happen, but just hold on to that rope toe through the fire of there being something on the other side.
Keep doing your weird dances, keep making your weird pots, and realize that sometimes the person you see who you think is more successful, that's a different track. It's a different job. That's the job of getting popular. It's not the job of making something great. So
success is actually doing what's in front of you and being faithful to what you know to do. Like, be faithful to that project you're doing, or that task of taking care of the elderly, or whatever your thing is. Be faithful to that. And that's success. The rest of it is, money's not a measure of it. Numbers of people are not a measure of it. Did you have something in front of you and you did it the way you knew it had to be done? That's success.
Thank you, Justine.
Thank you.
By the way, I mean, this is where it's not a real talk show, but promote your book. There's still, what do we got? 100 people there still?
If people, well, the two
Books.
One is about fame, the life cycle of fame, if you want to read about that. From the inside and the outside is a sociological look at it. And then face, 1 square foot of skin, is about women's faces getting older and why that makes people angry. If you want to read that. And then my film Violet is about the negative thoughts we have in the film. I call it The Voice, that cause us to make fear-based decisions. And so when you're making fear-based decisions, you're not being yourself, so you're off your track. And this is about someone who, how do you cross that chasm between a fear-based life and an instinct-based life? And so this woman, this stars Olivia Munn, it's kind of a map to, you know, how do you get to a life that's instinct-based, and how do you stop making fear-based decisions? So those are 3 projects. If you guys, you know, if any of that interests you guys, check them out. And hopefully they'll enrich you, entertain you, educate you, free you to be more yourself.
And I'll be at Zany Chicago on the 28th and 29th, doing this, but none of what I just said and punchlines.
Being funny. Oh, Chicago, you guys have an advantage here. Great.
I'm going out there. I have to, yeah.
You're asking where do you see Violet? Highly recommend you guys go to justwatch.com to find anything that's playing. It'll tell you like all the streaming places where any film, any show you want to see is playing. Justwatch.com. There's an app too. So.
Thank you, Justine. It was a pleasure talking and a pleasure kind of meeting-ish.
Yeah, and you know, thanks to everybody for hanging out for an hour. This was great, and we, you know, looking at all your comments and stuff. Thanks for taking the time and joining in. It's good. All right, guys. Bye.
How do I stop it somehow? Uh-oh. What do I do? Guys, it's over, but do I just press the X?